Hey guys, it's Bridget with Sandy Seed Company. We're here in the garden and we are doing some end of the year dahlia preps, particularly taking the dahlias out of the ground and saving the bulbs. How do you do it and what do you need to know? We're gonna go over that in this video. Now remember, there's one really important thing that you need to do for your dahlia bulbs when you're saving them. And if you don't do it, you couldn't ruin all of your work that season. So stick around, I'm gonna go over that step in this video. Now, if you stick around and watch this whole video, I'm gonna tell you how to dig up your dahlias, how to check them out for disease and rot, and how to save them, and particularly what you need to do in zone 9 and 10 to ensure that your dahlias are kept correctly so that you have them year after year. Okay, so we're in the back here in my dahlia patch, and remember that this video is really focused on zone 9 and 10. I'm gonna talk about steps that apply to all of the United States and all zones, but spoiler alert, there's some special things you need to know for zone 9 and 10. These dahlias actually were cut back in July. So we had a massive flush of beautiful blooms. You can check out all of that content on our Instagram. We've got videos on it. After they gave us a big flush of blooms, we cut them back to the ground, left the tubers in the ground obviously, and now we have a second flush of fall blooms. The reason why I want to point this out is because in zone 9 and 10, in areas that don't get a hard frost in the winter, you don't actually have to dig up your bulbs. You can leave them in the ground and they will actually perennialize, they will multiply underground, and they will continue to grow and grow and grow and give you blooms. Now, let me list some of the reasons why you would consider doing it in zone 9 and 10 or other zones. The biggest and first reason why you would consider pulling out your tubers is if you live in an area that gets a hard frost. Frost will kill the plants, and if the ground gets too cold and it's a hard frost that freezes the ground, it will kill the tubers. Dahlias are from Mexico and they are a warm season crop. They cannot thrive. So if you were in zone 8 all the way to 1, you're gonna need to dig them up in the wintertime. You'll need to look and see when those frosts are, but usually it's the fall. Before the first frost, you want to dig them up. Now, if you're in zone 9 and 10, you don't get a frost, why would you maybe want to do it? Well, if you need the space for something else, or if you want to dig them up to divide them, or another reason is if you have prize varieties that you fear losing during the winter, you dig them up and store them because there is a chance that they can rot in the ground in the winter. Now these particular ones look amazing. I'm leaving them in the ground. This is a dedicated dahlia patch, but let's go look at some dahlias that are done for the season and need to be pulled up because I don't want to lose the tubers. Let's go. Now you can tell, big difference, right? These look terrible, they're done. And what's crazy is we do actually still have some blooms that are popping up on some of them, but it's the end of the season. These are not worth keeping in the ground any longer, and I want this space for other crops. If you leave your dahlias in the ground in zone 9 and 10, they can rot, so you need to make sure you turn off the irrigation and you have good aerated soil for them to thrive. Digging up your dahlia tubers is something you should be careful about because if you pierce any of the plant matter, what you're doing is you're creating a wound where infection, bacteria can get in, and that's when you start to see a lot of issues with the storage of your particular tubers. So these are some that I dug up, and you can see I cut off one of the larger tubers here. And now this is a problem. This is an open wound where bacteria can get in, it's more likely to rot. So you really want to avoid that at all costs. You can see here that one of the tubers actually rotted in the ground. That doesn't mean that this clump is bad. I can still save this clump, I actually will. But you can see what happens, moisture, bacteria, things get in, and it can cause decay. So I really want to be careful not to do that when I dig them up. So let's dig up some of these guys and I'll show you how I do it. Okay, so I was gonna do this one, and look, here's a good example of what happens. Hi, little wormy, look at that. Oh, that's a good guy. But the irrigation's been on. This plant has been effectively done, and it still has some green sprouts here, but the tubers actually rotted off. You can tell that they're not connected. So I can continue to dig down in here, but but I know that I'm already gonna have some issues with these, and you can see how wet this is. This is pretty moist. So I really wanna save from a plant that's already healthy and the soil is a lot drier. Let's find one. Gophers love these, and I can actually feel, that's hilarious. Here's another fail. There's a big old gopher. Look at this gopher hole in here. This gopher just like went to town. Look at that. He was just like, nom, nom, nom. He ate this one, and he came and he ate this one. So here's proof that no matter how hard you try, there's some things that happen in nature that you don't have control over. So look, he ate all of this. Now, these are still good though, and these still could be saved, especially if you have a prized variety. So I'm not going to get rid of those. Here's one that's a little more complete. You can still tell that some gophers got to it. Now, as I mentioned, the biggest thing with these is not to injure them, because you don't want to introduce any disease or bacteria into these actual individual tubers. These are energy storage units for the plant, and you want to keep them as healthy as possible. Now, the next thing you want to do is make sure that you get as much soil off as possible, and then you want to rinse them. There's two reasons why you rinse them. One, you want to inspect the plant. You want to inspect to make sure they're healthy, because you don't want to save diseased tuber clumps. And also because you want to make sure that the clump is complete and has future eyes so that you can actually get sprouts off of it. So I will rinse this off really good and inspect it to make sure that it's healthy and happy. That gopher hole was perfect. Okay, so I'm taking off any of the growing sprouts because we don't need them. I've got the neck, and here's the clump. I'm really gonna rinse this off really good here so I can look at it. Now this is a good looking one because it's got several storage units for energy. It has a complete neck, and I know that next year, somewhere along this neck, it's gonna look like a little pimple is gonna swell, and that's gonna be the sprout for next year. I would cut this off here just because you don't need this extra amount. And then this needs to be dried. It is so, 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 so important that these are completely dry before storing, or they will rot. So what we like to do is take these, put them in, you can really put them in anything. You can put them in a crate, you can put them on a screen, in indirect sunlight where there's good airflow. So I will actually put these in our greenhouse because we have shade cloth over it in front of a box fan so that these dry completely before I store them. If there is any residual moisture on these and they get stuck inside a paper bag or a crate for the winter season, they could very well rot, and all this work that we did was for nothing. So do not rush that step. Make sure they're completely dry before you store them. Now, spoiler alert, in zone 9 and 10 where we don't get a hard frost, you don't even have to dig them up. But as I mentioned, if you have your irrigation on or we get natural rainfall, if your soil doesn't dry out very well, these could likely rot in the ground, or as you saw from this video, a gopher could come along and have a very good lunch. So if you leave them in the ground, you're more likely to lose them. It's a risk that you have to decide whether or not it's worth keeping them in the ground or digging them up. If you do dig them up, dry them out completely before storing them. So I've got this dahlia clump that I'm gonna save. You can put it in anything to save for the year. Now let's do like a cooking show moment, and we fast forward and this is completely dry. Obviously that's really important, just pulled it out of the ground. This would be completely dry before we stored it. You can put it in a milk crate, you can put it in a box, you can put it in a paper bag, it doesn't matter. Just like a lot of other crops that you store in the winter, think about storing it in something that's similar to a root cellar, right? You want it dark, you want good air circulation so that these don't rot. These will actually get packed in here, and because we have chickens, I actually just put the pine shavings from the chicken bedding in here. I like the way it smells, it's nice and easy and it's clean. You can also pack them in dry peat moss, that's another option. That's a little more messy, and because these get stored in the shed, I like to keep them kind of clean. So this will get filled with the pine shavings, and then I will pack these in here. Very, very important. If you're doing all the work to dig these up and store them, it's probably because you have some prized varieties. Make sure you tag them. Either tag the whole crate and make sure you know what it is, or put a tag on this individual tuber so that you know what it is. We like to use a tag with a little twist tie so that it attaches to it, and I know exactly that this is a Somerset, for example. And I know next year when I plant them out exactly what I'm gonna have. Now, if you've watched this whole video, you know that basically the important thing about dahlias is that they stay dry in the wintertime so that they don't rot, and that gophers don't get them. Well, spoiler alert, you can also do that in the pots. So what I can do is actually just take these pots and put them somewhere where they're not going to get seasonal rains, and they can be stored right in this pot that they're in, and you can label the actual individual pot. Now, you can see I've got these guys in these roots in here that I could pull up, and I could store these. And if I were to do that, I'd be putting them in here in pine shavings, which is basically mimicking the same thing as being stored here and kept dry. So you can decide what you want to do. We pull these out of our pots because I want to use these pots for ranunculus season, which is coming right up. So they will actually come out because I want to plant something else in there. But you could, in theory, just take this pot, put it under anywhere where there's maybe a little patio where it doesn't get any rain, and they can stay and live in there until they're ready to grow next season. Now that you know how to store your tubers, how to dig them up and properly store them to keep them for the following years, I would love it if you commented on this video and tell me how you do it. There's a lot of different ways to do it. What are some inventive ways that you found that make it really easy and successful to keep your dahlia tubers healthy and happy through the winter so you can plant them again in the spring? Now look, I'm just one person with a seed company and a farm and a garden, but I know that I don't know everything. And I would love it if you shared your ideas and your steps that you take so that we can implement them in our garden and learn what are the inventive ways to store your dahlia bulbs. Now, the best way to do that is to subscribe to our channel so you can be a part of our growing community and so we can help each other thrive. Now, if you've never grown a dahlia bulb before, luckily for you, we sell them. Every single season, we get them in the spring. We'll have them available for a short period of time. You can actually pre-order them, and then you can plant them right at the right time for zone 9 and 10. We don't have them right now, obviously, it's the end of the season, but on the product page, you can actually click so that you're notified when we get them in stock, and you can have them next year.